Well, good morning. Thanks for joining. I'm Bret Waters, and I'll be your cruise director for the next half hour or so as we talk about creating and delivering great pitch decks. So I'm sitting here eating my breakfast cereal. See that? And I have my coffee. See that? Because it's 8 o'clock in the morning here in California. And I'm thinking about how we're all told that a healthy breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? But it's hard when you're getting ready for a live stream first thing in the morning. Um, in 2022, shouldn't I be able to just push a button on my phone and have a really delicious, healthy breakfast appear? So that's my startup idea this morning. And I'd love to hear your input on my startup idea. So type it there into the comments box. Tell me your thoughts on how we could create a great new startup venture around delivering healthy meals to people who are busy getting ready for live streams. So we're here to talk about pitch decks, right? And if you walk around, Silicon Valley today, Palo Alto today, you'll see all kinds of people sitting in coffee shops working on their pitch decks. So what is a pitch deck, and what's the purpose of it? And most importantly, how do you create and deliver a great one? That's what we're here to discuss today. So when most people think of a pitch deck, they think of raising capital, right? Most people associate the pitch with raising capital. But the reality is that startup founders are pitching all the time, right? They're pitching to raise money. They're pitching for co-founders, pitching for employees, partners, customers, talking to the press. And so really there are a lot of different reasons why it's important to have a great pitch deck. You use it for, as a startup founder, you'll be using it for a wide variety of things above and beyond just simply fundraising. And before we get to how you prepare a great pitch deck, it may be important to think for a moment about what is our desired outcome, right? What do we want the pitch deck to do? And I think that we can say that the desired outcome generally from a pitch deck is to leave the recipient intrigued enough to wanting to know more, right? That you're not going to sell an investment off of one pitch deck. You're going to, maybe you're going to send the pitch deck to an investor in the hopes of getting a meeting. Or maybe you're going to give the pitch deck in an initial meeting with an investor in the hopes that you'll get invited back for a second meeting with the rest of the partnership. You're not going to get an investment off of a pitch deck. You're not going to get an investment off of one meeting. You're not going to get a partnership off of one meeting. And so I think the right way to think of your desired outcome for a great pitch deck is to leave the recipient intrigued enough that they want to know more. And the secret, honestly, if there's a secret to preparing and delivering a great pitch deck, the secret is really just to tell a great story, that humans are hardwired to be all about stories. And so, if there's one single secret to a great pitch deck, it's just simply tell a great story. And I like to sit down and actually write out the story first before I start building any slides. Because once you've written a great story, putting together some slides to illustrate it is pretty straightforward. Whereas putting together a bunch of slides and then trying to figure out what story they tell is a little more roundabout. So let's see. So what should be in a good pitch deck? And of course, there is no definitive answer because it depends on the venture, it depends on the founder, it depends on who you're talking to, perhaps. But here are some of the things that might be in a good pitch deck. First of all, what problem does your startup solve? Why are you exactly the right entrepreneur for this venture? What's your secret sauce? How does the venture make money? What's the competitive landscape look like? How big is the opportunity? How are you going to efficiently acquire customers? I mean, the leading cause of startup death is not enough customers, right? So, if you have really thought through how you're going to get customers, then put it right there in your pitch deck. That should be an important component. And what else we got here? What are your initial capital needs and what does that get you to, right? That especially if this is a fundraising pitch, might as well just be upfront with that. Okay, so some common questions that I often hear about pitch decks. One common question is, should I hire a designer so that I have a really beautiful pitch deck? And my general answer to that is no. That, telling the story and telling why you were exactly the right entrepreneur for this venture, that's far more important than having an over-designed slide deck. There's plenty of examples out there on the internet of good pitch decks. And I'm going to send you guys, after this live stream this morning, I'm going to send you an email with a bunch of links in it. And I'll give you some links to some existing pitch decks out there that you can look at, and you kind of base yours on that. So don't go hire a designer. Instead, focus on the story, focus on the quality of the story that you're telling. Another common question is, how long should it be, right? I had somebody the other day send me a pitch deck. There were 57 slides in the pitch deck. So I can confidently say that's too long. And so, you're probably going to have different length pitch decks. You're probably going to have a 5-slide one that you might send to somebody in order to get a meeting. You might have a 10 or 15-slide one that you present at the beginning of a meeting. You might have a slightly longer one that you use when you're talking to customers. So you probably will end up with multiple pitch decks. But the key thing is to keep it crisp, clear, and compelling. Shorter is always better. And as I'm fond of saying, if you can't sell it in 3 minutes, you're not going to be able to sell it in 30. And so focus on telling a great, crisp, clear, and compelling story in 3 minutes that makes people want to know more. What should you never put in a pitch deck? Well, I'll give you 2 things that you should never put in a pitch deck. The first thing is, don't ever say in your pitch deck that, best of all, we have no competition. There's nobody else doing this. So, if you say that, it means one of 2 things. It either means there's zero demand for what your startup does, or it means you don't know how to use Google search. Because anything that there is existing market demand for, there is an entire landscape of competitors and alternatives. And so trying to suggest that you are doing something that there's no competition for just makes you look foolish. Don't do that. And really, honestly, from an investor perspective, the fact that there are other people in the sector is a good sign, because that means that there's existing market demand. Now we just have to execute better and be positioned well, right? Another thing along the same lines is, don't ever put into your pitch deck the feature checklist and think that that is your competitive landscape. We've all seen these slides, right? Here's the features that our app has. Here's the features that the other apps have. Now, what's wrong with putting this in your pitch deck as if this is your competitive landscape? What's wrong with that? Well, I'll tell you, what's wrong with it is that it suggests that the app with the most features is going to win. And that is never true. There is never a time in history when the app with the most features ended up being the winner. And so if you put up this feature checklist slide suggesting that this is the competitive landscape, again, you just make yourself look silly. So instead, if you're going to have a slide in your pitch deck about competitive landscape, do something like this, where you show the landscape of competitors and alternatives, right? Because there's always competitors and alternatives. And you find some way to kind of represent the way in which they're positioned and how we fit in. So this example here is for when Zoom launched, right? So when Zoom launched, there were many other video conference platforms. And this shows a simple 2-dimensional landscape where one axis is to the extent to which they're focused on one-to-one calls versus large group calls. The other axis shows the extent to which there's deep enterprise integration versus no enterprise integration. So there's all these different players. Here's how they're positioned. Here's how we're positioned. That's a much more meaningful competitive landscape slide. Another common question is, so if I market confidential, then that means I can put proprietary stuff in there, right? And my answer to that is no. Just assume that anything you send to somebody is going to get forwarded. So don't put proprietary stuff into your pitch deck. But it should be easy to pitch your startup without putting anything proprietary in there. That, if your startup has developed a cure for cancer, you can have a very crisp, clear, and compelling slide deck about how you're going to go to market with your cure for cancer without having a slide that gives away the recipe for your secret cure for cancer. So assume that anything that you forward to anybody is going to get forwarded to others. So don't put confidential stuff in there, but that should not get in your way of producing a good pitch deck. Hannah asks whether or not this will be recorded, and the answer is yes, it will be recorded, Hannah. And on top of that, I'll also send you an email with some links and a summary and such like that, in addition to the recording. So last thing is, we're sitting here in 2022. The pandemic is still with us, and so many pitches are happening over Zoom. And so, do I have any tips on pitching over Zoom? And of course I do. And my main tip about pitching over Zoom is get a good microphone. The audio is the most important part, right? You can have the most beautiful slides in the world, but if your audio is breaking up, or your audio is echoey, or they're having trouble understanding what you're saying, then your pretty slides aren't going to make any difference. It starts with good quality audio. So go buy yourself a microphone. Here's the one I'm using this morning. It's a nice microphone. It plugs in. Don't use Bluetooth. Don't ever use Bluetooth. Have a nice wired microphone. It'll cost you about $19 to buy a good one. So that's my first piece of advice, is make sure your audio quality is good. And then, secondly, lighting is a good idea. And so, buy a ring light, or even if you don't want to buy a ring light, at least position yourself in the room such that the lighting is good, right? Notice where the light in the room is. Make sure the light is on your face, not behind you. Just basic stuff like that, be professional. And obviously solid internet connection. That goes without saying. That, make sure that before your pitch on Zoom, make sure you are somewhere where you have a good quality internet connection. And of course, a plug-in is better than wireless, but these days it's not that often we're somewhere that has Ethernet, right? But at least be somewhere with a good, strong Wi-Fi signal. Okay, so are you guys thinking about my breakfast idea? I'm hoping to have some tips here on how I can do my startup idea with the on-demand delivery of delicious, healthy breakfasts. So if you guys have any ideas, please type those into the chat box, because I need some help here. So I do own a domain, breakfast.com. So I think maybe I'll use that for the brand name. We'll see. Maybe everybody will misspell it, but that's going to be my brand name, I think. So I think that, I have this theory that most great startups begin with a founder who notices a problem worth solving. That noticing a problem worth solving is where most great startups begin. And so I think that's an important component to a good pitch deck. So with regard to my brilliant breakfast idea, I think that the problem statement looks something like this: that there's plenty of medical research that shows that having a healthy breakfast is an important way to start the day, and yet busy people with families often don't. They order crap from DoorDash for lunch, but they don't eat a good, healthy breakfast. I think that's kind of our problem statement, right? And now what we need next, now that we've kind of established a problem statement, which, as I said, can be an important component for a pitch deck, now we need a nice, simple one-sentence description of our venture. Because you'll use that one-sentence description probably in your pitch deck. You'll probably also use that one-sentence description when you send an email to somebody saying, I'd like to talk to you about my new startup idea. So here's an example of the wrong way to do a one-sentence description for our new breakfast startup. A disruptive, paradigm-changing new startup that uses a cloud app, big data, AI, and blockchain to bring passionate consumers seeking a healthy lifestyle a new way to enjoy morning meals that drive wellness, happiness, and social equality. It's a bunch of bullshit, right? It's a bunch of just buzzwords. So please don't do that. Don't think that your one-sentence description of your venture means trying to cram in as many buzzwords as possible. That is not what the exercise is all about. Instead, we want just a nice, simple, easy to understand sentence. For busy people who want to eat healthy, breakfast is a subscription-based service that delivers fresh, healthy breakfasts directly to your home or office. Nice and simple, right? No buzzwords, no complexity. All we want is a nice, simple, one-sentence description that makes people go, oh, I get what this is all about. That's pretty cool, right? Okay, so let's summarize what we've talked about so far this morning. We've talked about how, with regard to pitch decks, your desired outcome is usually to leave the recipient intrigued and wanting to know more. You're not going to have 100 slides that tell everything there is to know about this. You're just simply going to have a few slides that leave your recipient intrigued and wanting to know more. Because generally your desired outcome is a meeting or another meeting, right? Secondly, it's all about telling a great story. Humans are hardwired to be all about the story. So start by deciding what the crisp, clear, and compelling story about your startup venture is, and then build some slides to illustrate the story. Keep it short. If you can't sell it in 3 minutes, you're not going to be able to sell it in 30. There's all kinds of evidence that shows that if you make a presentation to an investor, they'll make up their mind within the first 3 or 4 minutes, whether or not this is something that they're interested in. So, optimize for that. On Zoom, buy a good microphone. It doesn't take much these days to buy a good wired microphone. So why the hell are you talking to the microphone in your laptop and sounding like an amateur? And keep your one-sentence venture description nice, simple, clean, and easy to understand. And these are some of the things that we mentioned before might be included in a good pitch deck, right? What problem we solve, why you are exactly the right entrepreneur for this venture, secret sauce, how does your venture make money, what does the competitive landscape look like, how big is the opportunity, how are you going to efficiently acquire customers, and perhaps if it's a fundraising pitch especially, you might want to mention something about how much money you're looking to raise and what milestone that gets you to, kind of what's your go-to-market plan, right? So let's see how we're doing here. So I think those are the basics. And Hannah asks whether or not your one-sentence description is your value proposition. I think it can be, Hannah. I think you can think of them as being the same or at least related. So the one that I used was, I said for, I said for busy people and families. So that kind of identifies our target market, right? It's for busy people and families. So I said for busy and people and families who want to eat healthy, which kind of suggests that the problem to be solved. Breakfast is a subscription-based startup. So now I kind of hint at the revenue model, at the monetization model by saying it's subscription-based. Delivers healthy breakfasts to your home or office. So now I was kind of suggesting that there may be kind of a B2C component, that we're selling directly to consumers. There may also be a B2B component. In other words, maybe companies want to sign up for our service to have healthy breakfasts delivered to the offices. So that's kind of my, that was my one sentence, I think. I think I have it more or less, right? So Hannah, I think that kind of in there is the value proposition. So I think the answer to your question, Hannah, is that they may not be exactly the same, but they're certainly related. Okay, so let's see. So let's see how we can do at my delivering to you a 3-minute pitch on breakfast. So I'm even going to set a timer here. How's that? So we'll find out how close I come to 3 minutes. Let me take a sip of water. Another good tip for pitches is always have a glass of water with you. It's easy when you get nervous and you're pitching. It's very easy to get dry mouth. All right, so I'd like to tell you guys about my amazing new startup, Breakfast. It's a healthy startup opportunity, in fact. So, we all know that there's plenty of research that indicates that a healthy breakfast is important, right? Our doctors have told us that. We've all read articles and research about how breakfast is the most important meal of the day, how important it is to have good breakfast, and yet, many people don't. One recent study said that 72% of American families don't eat a healthy breakfast. And I got to tell you that one of the reasons why this particular problem resonates with me is, first of all, my wife and I have 7 kids. And so, we spent a lot of years trying to get everybody dressed and fed and out the door. So I know how hard it is to prepare breakfast at all if you're a family, let alone a good healthy healthy breakfast for the kids. So this is a problem that I have lived, and I know how important it is, and yet I know how difficult it is. So, I thought to myself that, people pay for a gym membership, right? They pay for a gym membership in order to be healthy. So why the hell wouldn't they pay for a membership to get healthy breakfast delivered for them? So I'd like to tell you about breakfast. For busy people wanting to eat healthy, breakfast is a new subscription-based service that delivers fresh, healthy breakfast directly to your home or office. So we all know that food delivery is hot right now, right? There's Instacart, there's DoorDash, there's all this stuff. Consumers today are pretty comfortable with the idea of using food delivery services. In fact, McKinsey says that this is on its way to being a $200 billion sector. So there's a lot of tailwind behind this venture idea of breakfast, that consumers today, they're pretty bought into the idea of having food delivered. So it might as well be subscription based, and it might as well be healthy and delicious. So when you look at the landscape out there of food delivery services, there's clearly a whole bunch of them, right? And if we think of this landscape as being on one dimension, being the extent to which the focus is on breakfast, and the other dimension being the extent to which the meals are designed by nutritionists to be super healthy, here's kind of how everybody fits in. And of course, where we're going to fit in is we are going to be the startup focused just on breakfast with a menu that is designed by nutritionists to be healthy. Now, we have a whole financial model built around this. I don't want to spend time on this right now, but we certainly can sit down and do so. But the important things that I want you to take away from this are, first of all, that we're going to be using excess kitchen time in existing restaurants who use their kitchens for dinner but don't use them for breakfasts. So that's going to give us a real substantial cost advantage on this. Because we're breakfast only, we can focus just on that. Because we're doing delivery through partner networks, that gives us efficiency. And of course, the fact that it's subscription-based means that we know demand in advance. And so it allows us to be super, super efficient with our meal delivery. So we've done some initial tests. We think we can get customers for an average of about $18 through paid advertising. And we think that our subscription-based model will give us a lifetime value of a customer of better than six times that. So we think the economics on this are super, super compelling. And we've got a go-to-market plan that says that in the second quarter of the year, we're going to open our first pilot project, and then we're going to add additional geographies after that. So thanks very much. I appreciate your time. And I'd love to have a chance to meet with you and tell you more about breakfast, this very exciting new startup opportunity. Okay, so we came in at 3:40, so I was a little bit long, but I wanted to kind of cover a lot of things. Hopefully that'll give you a sense of how in a 3 or 4 minute pitch one can cover all those different things that I mentioned. And again, the goal here is to is for the audience to be intrigued and wanting to know more. So I kind of hinted at the fact that it was solving a real problem. I hinted at the fact that we have tailwind behind us because so many consumers today are comfortable with the idea of having home delivery of food. I gave a competitive landscape slide that sort of showed how we fit in. I talked a little bit about the compelling economics, the fact that we have thought through our customer acquisition cost against the lifetime value of a customer. And I kind of outlined that we have a go-to-market plan that is smart and staged in a kind of a smart and optimized way. And hopefully if I presented that to an investor, they would say, that's pretty interesting. We should have a meeting, which again, that is our desired outcome. So Amy asks a question about mood boards. Well, I love mood boards. I've never thought about using them as part of a pitch deck, Amy, but I think that's an interesting idea, especially with regard to, how you make the story crisp, clear, and compelling. What sort of messaging to use. I think mood boards could be an important part of that. I had not thought about that, Amy. Thanks. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful to you guys. I hope that I've, given you some sense at what the purpose of a pitch deck is, what some of the components of a pitch deck might be, what things to focus on, what things to not spend any time on, what things to say and what things not to say. And I hope that, my little example with breakfast is helpful to you in terms of giving you an idea of what a 3 or 4 minute pitch might look like. So thanks very much for joining this morning. I appreciate it. And I'll be sending you a follow-up email. I'll give you links to some of this stuff. I'll give you a link to this particular pitch deck. I'll also give you a link to some existing successful pitch decks that are out there. I'll give you a link to a couple of venture capital firms that have on their websites some guidance on what they like to see in a pitch deck. So I'll send that all to you. Thanks very much for joining this morning, you guys. Hope to see you soon. Bye.